Hello, hello, hello. How are you guys doing today? Well, I wasn't sure what video I was going to film for this channel today. I had several different things that I could talk about over here today. Some of them were funny. Some of them were just life things. I had written this note in my phone the other night before I was going to sleep, and Alex saw me and he was like, "What are you writing down?" And I said, "An idea for a Peter Does Stuff video," and it was a line from the movie My Dog Skip. And then I kind of turned that into an idea that I wanted to make a video over here talking about lines from movies that have like profoundly impacted my life, because they have. And, you know, ever since I was really, really little, I loved movies and grew up on movies. Both my parents loved movies, and so we would watch their favorites when I was growing up. My parents got separated when I was very young, when I was about 5 years old. So the majority of my love for movies comes from my mother. And in fact, every year I watched the Oscars with my mother, and she got very, very excited. The last, I would say, 10 years of her life. My mom loved the movie Basic Instinct, but some of my mom's favorites would kind of surprise you. Like some of my mom's favorite movies, my mom would defend, and it wasn't because I was gay, I can tell you that. My mom would defend the movie Brokeback Mountain like nobody's business. She loved that movie so much. And she would say to people when they would be like, "Oh, well, it's just like a gay love story." She's like, "It is the eternal love story is what it is. It's about the lengths that you go to when you love somebody." And she would talk about the scene at the very end when, Ennis would take out, I think it's Jack's, coat and smell it and things like that. And my mom loved that movie. My mom loved Fight Club. Fight Club was one of my mom's favorite movies. And, she would talk about how it had so much to do with, she would talk about it on levels that I didn't even understand it. I didn't even get it, but she watched that movie over and over and over and over again. She loved David Lynch movies. She loved Mulholland Drive, was one of her favorite movies. I love that movie as well. I think she bought me 4 different VCR tapes of that movie or something, because she kept on forgetting that she gave it to me. My mom loved all these different kinds of movies, but she really loved movies that really moved you, I can remember, so every year we would watch the Oscars, and my mom loved Sharon Stone because she loved the movie Basic Instinct, and I love the movie Basic Instinct. It's just, I know it's a horribly problematic movie, but she's just such a badass in there as Catherine Trammell, Sharon Stone. And so every year you had to dress up somebody famous to come over to the Oscars, which basically meant me and whatever person I was dating at that moment. And my mom would always wear this gold sweater, and this it was a sweater set, and then she would have a name tag and it said Sharon Stone on it. And she'd say, "Do you think I look like Sharon Stone?" It was kind of her little joke, right? And so we would always watch the Oscars together. In fact, when I read my eulogy at my mom's funeral, it was one of the things that I mentioned, and I joked in there about the fact that during the part, nobody could speak during the Oscars except for my mom, if I get my talking, I get, both of my parents are big talkers, but I definitely get it from my mom. And, my mom would be talking all through the Oscars, and as soon as you said something, she'd go, shh, 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 And she would always cry during the in memoriam part, when they showed everybody that's passed in the last year and things like that. And the Oscars were always really, really special for my mom and I. And in fact, I think it was the first year or two after my mom passed away, I could not watch the Academy Awards, it was really, really painful for me. In fact, it was very similar to my mom and I used to go to the state fair every year. Indianapolis has the Indiana State Fair, and we used to go every year. It was something I'd done since I was a little kid. My cousins from Fort Wayne, Indiana, they would show steer at the Indiana State Fair. And so we would go there and visit them when I was a little kid with go see my aunt, my dad's sister, and stuff like that. And so my mom and I would do that through our entire life. Well, after my mom passed away, I can remember Alex asking me if I wanted to go to the State Fair, because of my mom and stuff. And there was a year or two where I couldn't go. It was too hard for me. And so I grew up on all of that, and, the movies and all that kind of stuff. And so there was a couple years after my mom passed away that I was like, this year I'm going to dedicate the Oscars to my mom. And I took a Thursday and a Friday. My husband and I, we started going, it was the year that Argo and Lincoln and all those movies came out, because we went and seen like on that weekend before, like that Saturday or Sunday, we went and saw like 2 movies back to back. And then that following Friday and Saturday, I went and I watched like 5 movies one day, 5 movies the next day, to the point where like the first day after the first movie, I was done with like popcorn and soda. Like I couldn't anymore. And that year, The Impossible came out, I remember, with Naomi Watts. I loved that movie. And there were so many, I think Les Miserables was that year and things like that. And I can remember doing that. Well, ever since then, I had always kind of like wanted to watch all the Oscar movies, you know, like I'd done it that one year, and then like every other year, like I hadn't done it. Last year, I made a committed effort that I was going to watch every movie that was coming out for the Oscars, and I was really, really like excited to do it. I had so much fun doing it. If you watch my vlog, I talked about it regularly, and so that was something that I was going to do again this year, was I was going to watch all of the Academy Awards. And the reality is, I've only seen I've seen The Holdovers, or I've seen The Holdovers, and I've seen Barbie. And The Holdovers I absolutely loved. So the rest of the movies, I think there's like 10 movies. I have them all written down in a list. I haven't seen those movies. I'm very sad about the, you know, if you watch my videos, you know, like I was not as taken with Barbie as a lot of people were. And people were like, that's because you didn't grow up with Barbies. I actually couldn't wait to go over to some of my mom's friends' houses, because I had to, like, to some degree as a boy, hide my love of Barbies, and I knew that their friends' kids had Barbies and I could play with them over there. Barbies were a huge part of my childhood. For a lot of reasons, I just felt a disconnect from that movie. That being said, the fact that the director, Greta Gerwig, did not get acknowledged in the Academy Awards, and that Margot Robbie didn't get acknowledged for the Academy Awards, it's just like unbelievably sad to me, and I think a sentiment to our society today. That being said, one of my favorite movies last year, Women Talking, which I think is one of the most powerful movies in the entire world, that was also directed by a woman, she was not nominated as well, and that was a really, really important movie. It was a movie about a Mennonite community that, in another country, that was, the women were being drugged and told that they were being essayed by demons, when it was actually the men in the community. And it was about 10 women sitting in a barn in this Mennonite community deciding what they were going to do, whether they were going to leave the community as all the women together, whether they were going to stay back with the men. It was such a powerful movie. I've always been somebody that's been moved by movies, and when I think back on the movies of my childhood that I grew up with, which are probably not normal movies that children grow up with, you know, like The Way We Were, or, you know, Out of Africa later when I was like a little bit older, you know, and all the movies that I grew up with, I have such powerful memories of those, you know, and I referenced a lot of those in my mom's eulogy. My husband really wanted to see the movie Good Grief that was on Netflix, because he loves Dan Levy. I love Dan Levy. I love everything that Dan Levy does. I've loved Eugene Levy for years and years and years in all the Christopher Guest movies. I think it's interesting that, like, you know, now Eugene Levy and Catherine O'Hara are getting like all this acknowledgement for Schitt's Creek, which I love. I'm a diehard Schitt's Creek fan, right? Well, what's funny to me about that is that Catherine O'Hara and Eugene Levy have been in Christopher Guest movies, you know, for years and years and years. And if you've never seen those movies, you know, like Waiting for Guffman, or what are some of my, Parker Posey's in those movies. I mean, they're just fantastically done. Like, you know, Best in Show is one of my favorite movies. Eugene Levy and Catherine O'Hara play a couple in that movie. They're fantastic. I love everything that whole ensemble group does. And I think that Dan Levy is just, I would love to be his friend. There's just something, you know, so, like, I can remember, I read this, or saw this video about 10 things he always has to have that he travels with, and one of them was the Joan Didion novel, Stumbling Towards Bethlehem, and I went out and I bought that, because I had seen this documentary about Joan Didion, and I read it, and I was just so moved by Stumbling Towards Bethlehem. And so, I love Dan Levy, and I love everything that he does. Well, my husband really wanted to watch this movie, Good Grief, right? And we were in Mexico, and so we were going to wait until we got back to watch it. Well, the other night I said to my husband, like, do you want to watch Good Grief? And he goes, oh, I watched it a couple days ago. And so last night I was like catching up on my reality shows, catching up on 1,000 Pound Sisters and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, you know, I think I'm just kind of in the mood to watch a movie. And so I lit some candles, and I made my new thing is a London Fog, which is Earl Grey tea with cream and honey in it. I allowed myself one because of my weight loss journey. So I allowed myself one last night. I'm sitting there And I thought, okay, I'm going to watch Good Grief. I have to be kind of careful about movies like that, especially with what I'm going through in my life right now. I'm really like struggling a lot from the accident that happened 2 years ago. Grief from my mom, a lot of that's coming up through that. I've lost a lot of friends in the last couple of years from overdoses and things like that. I have to be very careful about watching movies that have to do with grief or dying and things like that, just to protect myself and my well-being. And last night I felt like I was in a pretty good space to do that. So I watched this movie called Good Grief by Dan Levy, and it is really, really powerful. And I actually read that he came up with the idea for the movie because he had lost, I think like his dog had passed away, that he was really, really close with. This in like a lot of his interviews. And I think also like a grandmother or somebody had passed away, or somebody close to him. And so he wanted to do this movie, which was basically a response to how people grieve together and how you get through grief, and that grief is individual. And you know, I'm watching this this movie, and so the movie is about this man whose husband is killed. It's right at the beginning, I'm not ruining it for you, whose husband is killed tragically, and then the aftermath of how he grieves that, and who he leans on, his friends, and how he deals with it, and how he moves through this grief, and things that he finds out afterwards, and things like that. It's a really, really powerful movie, and it's so interesting because I saw so many parts of myself in that. You know, he talks about like his mom having passed, and that he really never grieved her appropriately, and then he met his husband and he moved right into that. And I'm like, and they had been together 15 years, you know, and his mom had died 15 years before that. I'm like, this is so interesting because my mom died, will be 16 years in May, and my husband and I have been together 15 years, and my mom died in May and we met in August. And I've often, you know, talked about in therapy and talked to myself that, like, did I move into that relationship and adopt his family to take away from the pain that I was feeling with my mom, you know? And that's why when I came back into the rooms of recovery years later, I just like melted, because I really had never dealt with my grief, you know? And so much of what he was talking about in this movie, I so related to. But one of the parts that was the most fantastic was when he is encouraged to work through his pain and his grieving by his art, because he's an artist. And so, for those of you that know, I have been throwing around this idea. I came out with an announcement around Christmas that I am doing a recovery book about Christmas Eve, and then I was hoping to make it into a movie, possibly. That idea has been kind of like moved to the back burner. Well, last night I watched this movie, and afterwards I was like so inspired, and I sat there and wrote out the entire first chapter, because that's something my husband has always encouraged me, you know? When you're with somebody that really loves you, they will challenge you. That was one of the reasons why I knew my husband was a keeper. Because he wasn't somebody that just shined me on and told me what I wanted to hear. He was somebody that challenged me, you know? And he's always been somebody that's encouraged me to cathartically work through the pain in my life in creative ways. And I'm so grateful for that. And, you know, last night when I'm watching this movie and they're talking about working through your pain creatively, I was like, the whole idea for this book that I had, I mean, it's still the same idea, but the whole point of view shifted for me from this point of view of pain and working through my pain. And I thought, this is going to be the answer to how I do it. And really, in all honesty, and I don't know that the movie is going to be made this year. The more I look at it, I'm like, I really want to do it in snow and the blizzard, and that's hard, so I'm going to have to go somewhere where there's snow. So I might have to have the book come out this year and the movie come out next year. I don't know. We'll see. I don't know when it'll be done. It'll be done when it's supposed to be done. There's no rush on it for me, you know. It's this is a project of love for me. But what's interesting is that, and if you want to know more about that, that's over on my Peter Monn channel. I did a huge announcement on, I think, Christmas Eve about that, and it's probably called like a huge announcement or something like that. But what I realized last night as I was sitting there, and I like literally like just wrote out the entire first chapter. The first chapter, I mean, just like came right out of nowhere. And could completely see his perspective. What I realized was there's other people's stories and books and movies have always been the way that I've grieved any pain in my life. You know, even as a small child when I had no friends. And I didn't even know that I was grieving the loss of something that I had never had, you know? Because I would see other people that had friendships. I would see other people that had this. And I didn't have that. And I was grieving the loss of something that I never even knew that I had to miss to begin with, you know? From a very young age, you know, I have grieved things and worked through pain through movies, books, and music. And I'm so thankful for that. I'm not going to ruin Good Grief for you, but I would highly recommend it to you. I can tell you, it's not a movie that you will watch. Like, I saw these people being like, I bawled my eyes out, I did this. There were a few moments that I cried. There were a few moments that I was just like, damn, you know, like when something was said. It wasn't one of those movies. It was a movie that hit, you know, like a small flicker in a candle late at night. It was a movie that was just so beautifully done with a mixture of music and scenery, you know, and conversation. And it was really a glimpse into life. And I think that's why I loved it so much. Anyway, if you've seen the movie, let me know what you think in the comment section below. I love you guys, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.